We are ready to kick off week 9 in college football as we're talking here on the Prime Sports Network YouTube channel. And I wanted to highlight that because we are going to be starting our new Our Lads channel. Matter of fact, we've already started it. So make sure we're going to put a link in the description area so you can subscribe to the Our Lads channel in this video. And soon, most of the football videos are going to begin at Our Lads. We're going to definitely have some editing to do, so we'll continue to have videos here on Prime Sports Network. But for all you football fans out there, for the NFL and college football, make sure to subscribe to our Lads YouTube channel so you can take advantage of 100% of what we're going to be putting it out there starting really over the next few days. So Mark Lawrence, of course, joining me as always from PlaybookSports.com and the Playbook Experts YouTube channel. Just popped up the show you recorded yesterday on the channel. Another fun show done with some of the best in the business.
Yeah, we enjoy doing that, Greg, for sure. It's really a good time. It's a little bit more of a roundtable podcast this year than it's been in the past. Been really well received, and we even have our producer, Greg DePalma, joining us on the show. Yes.
Yes, I could have some fun with you guys, which
Yes,
is great.
we
Okay, so let's get into it. What we're going to do starting this week, and now that we're at that point of the season where we can start taking a look at standings and how important it is for championship races. So as we go through each conference, we're going to do that. We're going to continue to do what we always do as well, pop up the updated Heisman odds, futures, and we'll have our double-digit top upsets, under the radar games, and more. Starting, as usual, with the SEC. And matter of fact, at this point, I mean, it's not difficult to imagine how many people are anticipating Georgia being in the championship game once again. Matter of fact, I'm going to pop up their odds right here from DraftKings. As you can see, they are the overwhelming favorite. Alabama at 2-1 and LSU at 7-1. You also have Ole Miss at 45-1 and Florida at 50-1. Missouri, Tennessee in that mix as well. I bring that up, Mark, because I really have I think that Florida, Ole Miss, and LSU, because I can't really trust Missouri, and I think Tennessee's pretty much done. They still have a chance, but I think that it'll be a lot harder for them because they still have to beat Georgia head on head, and then they're going to have to run the table and hope Georgia loses another game. Same thing for Florida, but that's the thing. It's interesting. They're both 50-1, but Florida gets an opportunity to take on Georgia this week. LSU, meanwhile, like I said, they're down to now 7-1. And interesting enough, as I pop up the futures here on our board that we've been following as far as bargains, our top futures bargains, and LSU has now dropped down to 60-1. Not too long ago, they were over 100-1. And so now, and it's also interesting to note that their quarterback is the third choice to win the Heisman. So that to me is that says that should be the indicator right there that people are starting to take LSU seriously now as a possibility that they might have a shot at this.
Well, that's what a 62-0 win does for you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was fortuitous that the Army came into Baton Rouge, but it did help their status, their standings, and their odds right now. And Jayden Daniels plays and healthy as he is going all the way out. Like you say, they could end up being a live dog, at least if they make their way into that championship game of the SEC.
Yeah, we have actually, let's see, where did we, because when we were talking about both LSU and Daniels, so we had LSU, obviously we had LSU before they lost, but LSU on our board just last week was on our board at 150-1, and just 2 weeks on our board at 200-1. So now they're down to 60. And speaking of Jayden Daniels, he is not on my board now for the Heisman. and there's a reason for that. I'll pop up the Heisman numbers here, and that is because of the fact that it's not really it's at that time where it's just it's 3 to 1 or in that range. Matter of fact, yeah, I'll post it up there, but he's about 3 to 1, which is just no. I mean, I'm not going to do. I'm going to 14 to 1 like last week, or even we had 35 to 1 on the 13th, and I think that's the highest we've seen Daniels up until September, because we had Daniels. Yeah, I think that was one, because I don't want to get him confused with Jalen Daniels, but we did have him. That was the top number you could have gotten Daniels at Jaden Daniels at 35 to 1 on October the 13th. So now it's probably a little bit too late, but. Aren't you surprised, speaking of the Heisman, that Michael Penix last week when we talked about it, he was minus? I mean, it was ridiculous. He won the big game against Oregon by just a little bit. And we talked about how, well, one play here and Nix is in his spot and Penix is not. And we talked about how ridiculous it was for him to be that heavy a favorite. So just 1 week goes by where they squeeze by Arizona State, win the game. They're still undefeated. And his odds now go up to 3 to 1. And J.J. McCarthy becomes the favorite to win the Heisman after his best performance of the season. But it's like, okay, so that's all it takes is like one really good performance. And all of a sudden, I mean, that's pretty crazy. It shows you how wide open the race is.
It does, and it shows you how condensed everything is. It's all based basically on what did you do for me yesterday. As far as him being short number as he is today, I guess the value is gone from where he was a few weeks ago, as is the value gone from LSU as they were a few weeks ago, because winning makes for shorter numbers in football games. And even if you struggle in wins, much like Michael Penix did in their Washington win, the number evaporates. It shrinks down. And if you handicapped the Washington game and expected a letdown from Washington after that big Oregon win,
we did. We had that one.
A dull performance, you could have maybe sat back and said, hey, I want Michael Penix, but I'm going to wait till next week because I think they're going to throw up a clunker this week. So, there's a little bit of a combination both involved in handicapping the game and then applying it to a future Heisman future.
Yeah, but see, here's the funny thing, though. Okay, so Corum was 50 to 1. Now he's 90 to 1 after they just won, because McCarthy, I guess, is taking all of the Michigan, voters after, again, his best performance. There's no question. I mean, I've been critical of him this year. I don't think he's done very much, but he finally went out and looked like the quarterback that I think Michigan's been waiting for all season.
I think he's got the highest completion percentage of any quarterback.
He does. Right, and that helps, even though that kind of is one of those things where, because it's a lot of dinking and dunking.
Yes.
That's since when has that become a Heisman kind of, who wants to see? Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to see that, but finally he's throwing the ball down the field on the run as he's scrambling and making plays. But that's one game. So my question is, what happens in the next game if he throws for 150 yards and Blake Corum rushes for 300? Does Blake Corum all of a sudden see? That's why at 90 to 1, I'd be like, hey, if this is how volatile it's going to be, then I would be taking a look at some of the players like that are still undefeated, going to be playing in big games, and that could impact the race.
I think playing in big games is the key, because if they perform well in those big games, you went out, you did your shopping early on that football player, anticipated a big performance in a big football game, you can end up being way ahead of the curve and doing something just like that. So you got the Ohio State-Michigan game looming on. It's going to be coming up.
Yeah.
You can look at the Marvin Harrison numbers. You can look at the Blake Corum numbers, the McCarthy numbers, and anticipate one of those three players having a big game against one another here. So if you ended up taking all three of those football players, you might not be holding a bad ticket.
Yeah, and then I think this is also a good time to take a look overall at the futures. And by the way, Bo Nix too, if I pop that back up, he's also, I think, I think he might be a really good bet right now, because we've had him for a while. He's still a solid 13 to 1. and he is going to be playing in some really big games. I mean, he's going to be playing in at least two or three big games, and if he wins them all, and can get Oregon to the playoffs, then you're gonna feel pretty good if you get him even now at 13-1.
Well, there are some people who believe that he might not even be the best player on that football team. Their running back is outstanding, and but how many times are you going to find a running back knock out a quarterback in a Heisman Trophy
No.
race? It's like the same thing winning an NFL MVP. You don't find running backs beating quarterbacks. You don't even find wide receivers beating quarterbacks. So you have to kind of stay in the lane, I guess, and focusing on the quarterbacks.
All right, so here are the latest futures overall to win the championship. Michigan is the favorite over Georgia. Florida State or Ohio State, they're at 7-1. And everybody's
Michigan's the favorite over Georgia to win the championship.
Oh yeah, they were slightly favored last week,
Okay.
and then after blowing
It
out
widened,
Michigan State,
Okay, right.
yeah. So and we talked about it, they don't deserve to be. This is the whole philosophy. I just don't understand is when you are a defending national champion, and you're still playing well enough and undefeated. I don't understand how that team is not. Now again, these aren't the rankings. This is what people put money on. So that's what the public is saying is they feel right now Michigan is slightly a better shot than Georgia. You still have Oregon at 25-1, and as we talked about with LSU in there, and then some of the usual suspects. So I have my current bargains list that does include Oregon. Still LSU is a bargain at 60-1. So if you haven't taken advantage of that yet, what are you waiting for? And then I have two new ones to the list. Oregon State at 150-1 because they've been about that a little higher all season. And I just figured, well, now the later we get into the season, why not? I mean, they're still in a situation where they could run the table and they're in the mix. And then Florida is new as well. And they're 500-1. And the reason I'm putting Florida in there is because
if they take Georgia out, their number goes to 100-1.
There you go. I like them this week. And because of that, they will be looked at just like LSU is right now. They will be looked at like LSU if they can win this week. It's a big ask, but if they can win this week, all of a sudden you're going to be pretty happy that you put even a buck on Florida at 500-1.
Well, of the teams you mentioned there, there's one guy I might have reservations about, and it's only because of what I just spoke about, the handicap of the game this week. The way I handicap the Oregon State-Arizona football game, I have Arizona winning the game.
Sure.
And if they take Oregon State down, all of a sudden that 150-1 dissipates. Yep. Exactly right. Exactly. And they're going into a real tough situation there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that they, I don't think they have the talent, but it's just a matter of is someone going to be able to survive out of the Pac-12 with just one loss? I doubt it. And that's too bad because I think the Pac-12 this year deserves a representative, but we'll see. I think Oregon looks like they might have the best chance right now because they're going to be, if they can take care of Utah, of course, this week, which is a huge game.
Well, you still have Washington undefeated. And, while they've struggled a little bit here, they struggled their last game, both teams let down after that Washington-Oregon game. You're still likely to get that undefeated team coming out of the Pac-12. But I'm with you. I happen to think Oregon's the best team, even though they lost to Washington.
All right. Now, let's take a look at the futures for the conferences as we break everything down here. And again, starting with the SEC, we flashed that on the board, and I'll flash it on the board again. Again, Georgia's the favorite. Let's talk about, well, really, if you take a look at it this week, the big game, Georgia and Florida. Now, I'm going to go against one of the biggest trends in the playbook guide this week, and that is in this game that says the Georgia Bulldogs have covered 18 straight games off a straight-up double-digit win when they take on an SEC team off an upset. 18 straight.
That's a
I'm going
pretty
against
strong
that.
number. It's a pretty strong. You know something? You can go against it, but there are situations that I think also surround the game that are more meaningful, and it's the fact that it is an undefeated Georgia football team. It is a rivalry, and you do have Florida with an extra week to get ready for the football game here as well. I don't blame you for going against it. I kind of would shudder thinking, okay, there's 18-0 going up against me, but you can also build your case and make your case for Florida, and then walk away and say, I feel comfortable backing the Florida Gators.
For the first time in his career, and maybe I'll get uh, uh, pie in the face for doing it because I've been very critical of Graham Mertz his entire career. Not anything against him, but all of the outside media look at this guy. He's going to be awesome. He's going to be great for Wisconsin. And every season, the preview magazines, oh, this is his year. Oh, this is his year. And I'm just sick and tired of hearing it. And finally, it didn't work out. He transfers out. He goes to Florida. Beginning of the season, well, nothing's happening. I mean, he's not doing anything special. He's looking okay, but he hasn't
Yes.
won any football games until last time he stepped on the field. And if you take a look at it now, he's got a 76% completion percentage. His career best was 61% for the year back in 2020. His career best touchdown to interception ratio was last year 19-10. This year it's 12-2. And in his last 2 wins, he's thrown for 677 yards with 6 touchdowns and no picks, including the big comeback against South Carolina. He is right now on top of his game. He's never been better heading into this game against Georgia. There is no Brock Bowers, who is going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. He's the best player that Georgia has. He's not going to be on the field. And we've talked about Georgia kind of just hanging around most of the season with the exception of the Kentucky win. Even last time out against Vanderbilt, they looked like the same Georgia team we saw before Kentucky. So, I'm thinking they might be ripe for the upset on Saturday night.
I think they could be as well, Greg. Florida's played really, really well in this rivalry series when they've had an extra week to get ready for the win. And when they're coming off back-to-back wins, 8 times they've been in that role. They've won 7 games straight up and to the number.
Okay.
In that particular situation, which is, I think, obviously a strong number in their favor here. I love the fact that Brock Bowers is out for this football game after undergoing the ankle surgery here. When you lose your best player on the football team, it's meaningful, especially when you're a targeted team like Georgia is. And we knew at the beginning of the season, I don't want to belabor the point, that there was no way in God's green earth that Georgia could play up to the same level this year that they did last year or even the year before. And they're proving that to be true. So whether or not we'll see the upset remains to be seen, but I think there's enough going on in Florida's favor where they can at least bring home the cash.
Yeah, Georgia just won 4-1 against the spread this year. So
Yeah,
it's not like they're covering. The other game of consequence is Tennessee, Kentucky. And that's and especially for Tennessee because Kentucky's already faced Georgia and lost, as we just mentioned. So Tennessee still has Georgia on the schedule. Let's say Florida upsets Georgia on Saturday. Well, Tennessee can still, just like Florida, Tennessee can still win. Now they would then need Florida to lose, but Tennessee could beat Georgia, run the table. Florida loses a game, and all of a sudden Tennessee can be in the SEC championship game. And with 2 losses, you win as we just said with LSU, we've been saying it for the past month, doesn't matter. You have 2 losses, you win the SEC championship, you're going to get up in the playoffs. I mean, it's going to be real hard to leave out an SEC team of the playoffs, even with 2 losses. But anyway, tough game at Kentucky, 3.5-point spread. But I like Tennessee in this one. They've only lost 2 in a row under the new Heupel, under their head coach. And if you look at this, and this definitely, we talked about this on the show yesterday on your channel about NFL head coaches off the bye, and off the bye records are important for teams, especially ones like that have the same head coach. And so far, it looks like Stoops, because I believe he's been there. How long has Stoops been at Kentucky now for? 7 years, 8 years?
I think I think he may be bordering on 10. Okay.
Oh, is that long? Okay.
Yeah, 10 or 11. Yes, right.
Yeah, so 11. So he's been a part of all of these numbers. Kentucky just 1-6 against the spread with rest. So I am taking Tennessee, and I just think we're starting to see Kentucky slide, get in one of those second half slides like we've seen the last couple of years.
Well, I'll be sitting on the other side of the field from you in this game here. I'm going with the Kentucky Wildcats here for a couple of reasons. Number one, 44-6. That was how bad they got beat to Tennessee last year. And Mark Stoops is terrific in revenge. He's terrific as a home dog, 6-1 to the spread, 4-0 with revenge in that role. In the last 14 times that he's played with Southeast Conference revenge, 12-2 to the number here. I think this is a nice spot for Kentucky here. Now they're going to catch Tennessee. I think maybe they may be in the wrong mindset here. They were up 20-7 at half in the football game last week at Alabama, and they got outscored 27-0. That's demoralizing.
Oh yeah.
You go into the locker room and you're all pumped up, and you come out and somebody put a pin in the balloon, and I don't know if they can get that balloon blown back up in time this particular week, taking onto the road against a mean, mad Kentucky football team. I'm going to play Kentucky plus the points.
Yeah, it gets old after a while watching these teams. We've seen it again with Georgia, South Carolina, and Georgia, and even to the extent last week with Duke and Florida State. You just see these teams and they're looking like they're going to pull off the upset in the second half, and then it's just like 95% of the time they can't hold on, and
Nope.
it's that's the one thing about college football, that when you get to the top, it's kind of hard to beat these really, really good teams. And that's what happened to Tennessee again with Alabama. Okay, now let's move over to the Big Ten. And Ohio State had the big win last week. What that said to me, though, more than anything, was I think everybody, and especially I would venture to say Penn State fans, very disappointed in the play of their young quarterback. That wasn't very good. That was just bad. I mean, because Ohio State,
he took the lump. He did take the lump. There's no question.
yeah, and Ohio State wasn't like they looked like. It's not like Ohio State's defense has been this juggernaut for the past couple of years. So I don't want to hear all about how great Ohio State's defense is now. Yeah, that was ugly. And I know James Franklin deserves a lot of blame because he can't win these big games. But yeah, when your quarterback's playing like that was pretty bad. And the thing is, it wasn't like they got blown out by 30. Just imagine if he had just played halfway decent.
A decent game, exactly right. It could have gone down to who scores last. That football game could have.
And they had that penalty taken away on that defensive touchdown, which really could have changed the entire game. So yeah, that they didn't deserve it anyway. But yeah, I it's hard to think right now about even Ohio State with the win. And the way Michigan's playing, it's hard to imagine Ohio State's going to be able to beat Michigan unless Michigan does something to look like there's a chink in the armor by the time they play Ohio State.
You know what the Buckeyes are doing this year, Greg? They're doing just enough to win football games. They're not blowing people out. They're not putting a Michigan assault on everybody they're playing here. They're doing just enough to win the football game. Notre Dame, Penn State. They weren't overly impressive wins, but they were wins against good football teams. But the way I see this coming down this week is much like an aftermath of what we saw with Oregon and Washington. When those two teams prepared for one another, it was their biggest game of the football season, and we saw the letdown for both teams the following week. I think you're going to see the same similar thing to Ohio State this week. They were pumped to the max and got everything they could out of their team to take Penn State out last week. I don't see how they can be up this week as high as they were last week. And you've also got in Wisconsin here a team that's in first place in their division in the Big Ten Conference, and they're a 14-point home underdog. Are you kidding me? And it also ties into what Wisconsin does the best. You dress them up as a home dog of more than 6 points. They're 10-0 to the spread the last 10 times they've taken 6 or more at home. I think this is an ideal spot for Wisconsin, if not to pull the upset, to bring home the money.
Yeah, for me, that division is not very good. Wisconsin, if I had Mordecai, I'd be more on the side of thinking that they can get this done. I'm gonna have a hard time believing that they're gonna be able to hang unless it's one of those 20-10 games, which it could be, based on how Ohio State's been playing offensively. That's how Wisconsin's gonna cover the game. because 14 for Ohio State against anybody other than Penn State or Michigan usually seems pretty good. Oh, you only have to give 2 touchdowns. Um, and if you look at it, Ohio State 4-0-1 against the spread last 5. On the flip side, here's one that goes completely against Wisconsin from the playbook guide. Wisconsin 2-15 against the spread off a straight up ATS win when they take on a team off back-to-back straight up ATS wins. So I'm going to take Ohio State in this game, but not because I think it's going to look pretty. I just think it's going to be hard for this kid, this young quarterback, to come in. And by the way, last week in the game, they had to come from behind. They were down 21-7 in that game against Illinois. Maybe that's a springboard for the young quarterback. That's very possible. Maybe that gives him confidence. But we'll see. I mean, that's the thing about college, which is why it's so much fun, is because you just don't know. Every time these young kids come into these situations that they've never been in before, you got no idea. You got no idea if this is going to be the next star quarterback of Wisconsin or whether or not he's just going to be way in over his head.
Have you got Mordecai out for the year for Wisconsin?
Not for the year.
No.
So still out for this game, but not for the year. All right. So and by the way, I flashed up the odds to win it all in the Big Ten. It's almost impossible to take a look at any team other than, if you think it's going to be Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. Because again, remember we talked about this. Penn State will host Michigan.
Yes.
And if this young quarterback learns something and is much more comfortable at home, and they could upset Michigan in that game, and Michigan beats Ohio State, well, now we've got that scenario we talked about where anything is possible, but still kind of hard to believe that it's going to be any other team. But the best bargain now is Penn State at 12-1. I'm not backing them anymore because that was just I can't back a team that looked that awful offensively. Wisconsin at 14-1, and then the rest. And we talked about that lousy officiating decision in the Iowa-Minnesota game, which really just crippled Iowa's season because we know they can't score on offense. So they get this unbelievable playmaker to return a punt for a touchdown.
At the end of the game, right?
And they call it back. It's just wow. If they would have been in like I don't know, they could have been in maybe half the stadiums in the country, and I'm not sure those officials get out of the stadium. They're lucky it was Iowa.
That was unbelievable, just unbelievable, that call. Probably when you're going to review the 10 worst officiating mistakes in college football this year, that has to make the top 10 real. Absolutely.
And again, I said it before, I'll say it again. If anybody wants to back that, and these TV people will, well, you know what? Then change the freaking rule. So I don't care what it is. It was bad. Okay. So, and by the way, if Wisconsin beats Ohio State somehow, then and look, that could happen if the kid plays well and Ohio State just offensively can't get anything going. And if that happens, then everything does kind of open up big time. But Wisconsin then is in the driver's seat. And by the way, if they can beat Ohio State, even though it would be at home, they are 14-1 to win the Big Ten championship. So do you think it's worth it? Now, statistically speaking, it is that if you think Wisconsin could beat Ohio State, then you might want to take Wisconsin to win the Big Ten championship at 14-1.
At 14-1 to win the Big Ten championship, absolutely you should. They win this football game, it almost guarantees they'll be in the Big Ten championship game, which is all you want. You need to get yourself into position. My question is this: what happens in this scenario if you have Penn State beating Michigan, and then you have Ohio State beating
Michigan beating Ohio State?
Beating Ohio State. Yeah. How do those three teams shake out of that whole thing?
Most of the time, it's ranking.
Okay. Well, if it's rankings, then they'll probably put their foot on the pedal. That's the Michigan motive.
Probably.
Yes.
That's why it's good that we're going to get an expanded playoff.
Right.
Yeah, because it wouldn't be fair. Because you're right. I mean, Penn State now has very little chance. They'd have to win convincingly against Michigan, not just beat them. But they'd have to win so convincingly that people would have to go, all right, now, wait a second. Now we got to give them a shot.
And then they'd have to have Michigan beat Ohio State.
And then,
right?
yes, and it's still asking a lot. All right, so that's the Big Ten. Let's now move on to the ACC. There is a game tonight I just wanted to throw in there. Matter of fact, I'll just pop up my picks right now so you can see them. You can freeze the screen so you see exactly all of the picks. The upsets we'll go over a little bit and so forth. But I just wanted to, because one of the games I really like tonight, by the way, is Virginia Tech against Syracuse. This is a game, you know, I'm starting to get very impressed by this young quarterback for Virginia Tech. He's starting to look better and better every week. And I just like the direction they're going. Remember, we talked about this with Syracuse. I mean, they're now, the script is there for Syracuse again with the second half collapse. They've lost their last 3 games by 112-24. And if you just look at what happened last year, it's so yeah, I really like Virginia Tech. The kid Drones is the quarterback for Virginia Tech, a very young quarterback that looks like he's going to be a good one for Virginia Tech.
Well, you've got a Syracuse football team that has really, really lost their oil. They started out pretty well. They caught a lot of people's fancy. They lost a football game, and it hasn't stopped pouring out since. This team is 0-9 to the spread the last 9 times they're coming off a loss. And I don't know what happens in this football game to reverse something like that. And as you mentioned in Virginia Tech here, you had a gutsy football team that not a lot was expected from at the beginning of the football season. I think they've outplayed those expectations. And they're at home here against Syracuse. There's no way in the world you'll find me ordering up a Syracuse ticket in this game.
Syracuse also 0-10 against the spread versus an opponent with a less than 666 winning percentage that comes into the game in a revenge situation. So again, 0-10 in that spot. Meanwhile, Virginia Tech has covered 5 straight as a home favorite off a double-digit spread win when they take on a team with a winning percentage of 500 or better. We have to talk about the 2 big games from last week. Matter of fact, 3 key games, but the Florida State Duke game. And by the way, I think Wake Forest is a nice pick in this game for the same reason we talked about it last week. And I think if you see some of these games, and maybe this is even a game that could be gotten because Wake Forest has beaten Florida State 3 straight times, and Florida State has covered 5 straight as a home dog with 3 outright wins. One of them was against Florida State as a dog. Another was last week when they beat Pitt as a dog. Real exciting ending. So they're 8-1 dog. Now I didn't do it on the money line, but I'm gonna throw a buck or 2 on it. I just didn't want to put it on because I have to invest 100 on it. Duke, in the meanwhile, is a 4.5 point dog against Louisville, almost 2-1 on the money line. And I'm not running away from Duke. I mean, they almost did it. They had him in the 4th quarter. It was there for the taking, and very similar to the way Alabama covered their game. Florida State was able to cover their game, which is how in the world did Tennessee not cover 9, and how in the world did Duke not cover 14 in the situations they were both in?
Leading in the 4th quarter of those football games. The tragedy to the Duke football game is they lost their quarterback again. And when he went out of the football game is when the floodgates opened. The backup couldn't complete a pass to save his life. They stood no chance. They had no running game. It was all Florida State and onslaught from that point thereafter here. So you could say that Florida State was a bit fortuitous in that win, you know. I've kind of like been quasi cold on Florida State. They're getting all this love from everybody, and then here they go and they win and cover against Duke. So that all the "I told you so"s are going to be coming out here this week. But I want to tell you, I thought I was in real nice shape going into the 4th quarter of that football game with the Duke Blue Devils.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
I was upset enough that they lost the game. I just was shocked that they couldn't cover.
Yeah, shocked. on top of it, exactly yes. Right.
It was crazy.
And there was a bad, I think, coaching decision by Mike Elko in the game when he was up 3 down in Florida State territory inside the 10-yard line. He had 4th and 3, and he opted to go for the first down. If he kicks the field goal and he goes up 6, he still gets something out of the drive. When he missed that field goal is exactly when the floodgates opened up for Florida State in the football game. It was almost like saying, okay, you're going to open up the door and give us a chance.
Yep.
We're going to show you you made a mistake. That's exactly what happened there. That compounded with the injury, obviously, to Leonard in the football game. But it was still a football game that I'm not going to forget for a long time. Maybe if they do well in the bowls, Duke, maybe it'll be a little sad for that injury, but that burn. But I think it was a real hard loss to lose with Duke in that football game.
And by the way, there's a big matchup for Duke and Louisville because let's remember, Duke lost to Notre Dame, not a conference loss. So both Louisville and Duke are set up as far as the division where right now, all right, Florida State's in the championship game, but Louisville, North Carolina, Duke, and Virginia Tech all have one loss. So all right, Virginia Tech's doing well, but they're not going to get there. What on earth was North Carolina doing? I mean, that's just one of those games where you just know they completely took the game for granted, and they just now I don't know whether or not you can blame the coach for that. At some point, the players have got to just and they just weren't they're just not championship players. They just proved it. They couldn't beat Virginia, and again we think. This is maybe a program. Tony Elliott's going to get this program going. They've shown a little bit of life this year, and then they got their big win, which was great for them. But A, terrible for the conference, and B, with North Carolina, you know what? I'm not so sure that the hangover doesn't continue with Georgia Tech because Georgia Tech loves these situations.
Yeah, they took North Carolina out each of the last 2 years.
Yes, as a dog.
Yes. So, they're not going to go in here intimidated, at least, to say the least, in a situation like that. And Mack Brown, I'm beginning to scratch my head and wonder or not whether he is championship caliber material coach. Losses like that should not occur, not when you're a 20-point home favorite, my goodness, and lose the game in the manner in which they lost the football game. I couldn't touch North Carolina with a 10-foot pole this week.
Yeah.
Because teams like that are almost always staggered. It's like getting up off the map. A boxer, I can see Mike Tyson getting up off the map and he's wobbly. He's trying to throw these haymakers, but he's wobbly and doing just that. Well, that's what North Carolina is going to be this week, wobbly when they go into Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech's going to take the field with a lot of confidence.
Yeah, again, they upset North Carolina by 14.5 and 21 and 21.5 last year.
Yep.
And they're getting 11 in this one.
Unbelievable.
Georgia Tech has covered 3 out of the last 4 as a dog this year, or 3 out of 4 as a dog this year, winning 2 outright, including the 19-point upset win at Miami. So yes, I'm Georgia Tech is definitely on my list as well. I had to decide based on my system. It just made more sense to take the points, but I am definitely putting money on Georgia Tech and the money line as well as the 11.
Well, the last 17 times North Carolina's played a conference home game, they've gone 2-15 to the spread the game after that. I don't know.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, well, I don't know what condition they're going to be in this week to reverse a number like that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's why I love the 11. And if somehow North Carolina can escape and pull out the win, okay. But hey, I'm going to gamble on the money line as well, just not so much. And see, North Carolina right now is 450 to 1. So they're about 4 to 1 to win the ACC, to win the ACC championship. But see, I'd still rather think about either Miami or Duke, because Duke, and by the way, Riley Leonard, there has been no indication at this point that he won't play. Okay, so we don't know if he's going to play or not. Maybe he won't. This is the thing about especially college football. We have no ideas about these injuries. But his status is still up in the air this week. But it's not Florida State. So they have a much better chance of beating Louisville without Leonard than they do, of course, Florida State. So that's possible. But Louisville's 7 to 1. Again, this is Jeff Brom is just better in these dog rolls. So that's why I think if Duke can win this week, they are still in a very good position to end up maybe in a rematch with Florida State in the ACC championship, and maybe a healthier Riley Leonard, which would be really good to see. So 14 to 1, I'd prefer that. And Miami, what can you say? No Van Dyke. They're behind early. They're behind 2 scores in the second half. It's looking like it's just going to – we've seen this story before. Clemson's in the lead. This game's over. And they found a way and then did it in overtime. That was one gutsy win by Miami, and just what a difference the narrative that could have been if they would have lost that football game.
Incredible. If they lose the football game, all of a sudden the cat calls for Mario Cristobal out in full force, like they should be.
And now he's the savior again.
Now he's once again a savior, right? Exactly. Maybe heck, he might even get a contract extension.
Yeah. Now they'd have to. Now the thing is, there's so many teams when you got 2 losses, it's going to be hard. But I don't know. It's the ACC. We've seen crazy things happen with the ACC. So I don't know. Maybe a team's going to be in the championship game with 2 losses.
Well,
I'm not talking overall, of course. I'm talking just in the conference. So I think that's possible.
In the ACC conference?
Yeah, and Miami's 22-1, and they have to play Florida State.
Yeah, it could well be a 2-loss team in that conference championship game in the ACC.
Who would you go with
besides
Florida State?
Well, the other end is really wide open.
You got the odds up on the screen. You can see them.
Let me see here. I don't know if I can see them or not.
You can see them on mine. Oh, it's a little bit small.
Yes, it is.
Let me go ahead and. That better?
Yep. So out of that list that I'm looking at right now, Duke does look attractive, at plus 1,400. There's no question about that. I think you could dismiss just about anybody underneath the 2. And on that one side, I would say Duke to come out of the opposite division to take on Florida State. That would be my choice, Duke. Like you mentioned, if the Duke quarterback is healthy here, that would be the ticket that I would buy for sure.
Yeah, there are no divisions, by the way, in the ACC this year. No.
Oh, okay. That's right. They did away with that. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it'll be just the top 2 teams. Okay.
So again, that's why I think Miami is even a possibility at 22-1. Because they have to run the table, and then they need some things to work their way. But it's not. Again, this is the ACC. We could see a bunch of these teams losing. But anyway, that's why they're 22-1.
Does Clemson have a chance?
Well, they've lost to. They have no, because they have. Actually, no, they have. Yeah, no, they don't, because they lost all 3 of their games because the week 1 game was against Duke.
So they have 3 conference losses.
3 conference losses. They're done.
Good night, Clemson. Yes.
Yes, that's why the only team. That's why Virginia Tech. Forget. That's why. Yeah, it's basically. Do you trust North Carolina and Louisville? Which I don't. Which opens the door for Duke and Miami. So.
Well, those would be the 2 logical teams.
Yeah.
Duke and Miami, for sure.
Maybe you do them both. Because if either of those teams play Florida State in championship game, they can beat them.
Well, right now they got North Carolina right behind Florida State.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Do you trust? Because if North Carolina loses this week to Georgia Tech, there's your second loss.
Even when they were undefeated, I didn't trust them.
There you go.
I don't know what it is. They're not really staunch defensively, and May is up and down. We know, as I mentioned before, about Mac Brown. You never know, what kind of a game plan he's going to put together here. I would look beyond North Carolina and at Duke and Miami.
Yeah, Louisville really, because they're going to play Virginia Tech next. They do get the next 3 are at home, which is good, but they are at Miami. Okay, so that if Miami beats Louisville, now they're tied, and Miami's got the tiebreaker. You would guess. North Carolina, they get home against Duke. So again, Duke right there with the chance. If Duke does what this, again, the path is there for Duke. Just win out, and you'll be playing Florida State in the championship game. So North Carolina would still have to beat Duke, Clemson, and North Carolina State. And the Clemson North Carolina State games are on the road, just like this week. I just the way it's working out, I'm gonna look at Miami. Not that they have an easy schedule, but you would think that if they can't use this game as a springboard, then nothing will be a springboard.
Well, they do have the talent. Miami does. It's just a question of whether or not Cristobal can reel it all together.
All right, so that's the ACC. And so again, we went over those games. Miami, by the way, an 18.5-point favorite against Virginia. That series has been pretty close. The last 5 have been decided by 8 or less. And Clemson's at North Carolina State. let's move on to the Big 12. And in the Big 12, there's some really compelling storylines for the Big 12 this week. And we're going to start with the game that is my pick of the week. And I'm gonna disclose my pick here to you, Mark. This was my one and only 3-point college football pick on our contest.
Well,
Kansas.
I was just going to say, because Lance Leipold and the situation being what it is, I agree with you 100%. And I saw a triple play in the contest as well. So I kind of rather knew where you were going with this. And I really, really agree with it, with the selection here. This is an Oklahoma football team that just does not impress me. Dylan Gabriel's a nice quarterback, but now all of a sudden they're carrying Oklahoma weight from Oklahoma days in the past, and you've got a Kansas football team that I don't think is going to be out-coached here in this football game. I think they got much better the coach in Kansas and the home dog in the contest here. I will be on Kansas, and I really hope you cash your triple play in the Wise Guy contest.
I appreciate that. And by the way, they're almost a 3-1 dog. Now, the word is that Jalen Daniels is not going to start, but he hasn't said that he ain't going to play. If he gets in there, it's just a big deal. But I took him without Jalen Daniels. So if he can get in there, because I'm thinking if Jalen Daniels is the quarterback, this is a 6-point spread. What do you think? 6 or 7?
Well, I think it is. For sure it is. Right.
Yeah. It started at 10.
Right.
So, by the way, Kansas was also off a bye. Oklahoma came off their bye to have that terrible performance against Central Florida, where they were lucky to win that game. And once again, Leipold, how many times we have to say this year? Because we've said it 3 times, and we've cashed in all 3 times. He's now 29, 10-1 against the spread at home as an FBS head coach over 40 games. So
why do you want to step in front of something like that? My goodness. And then you got Oklahoma with the Bedlam game up next against Oklahoma State.
Yes, perfect. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
On top of it, it's
last one too.
Yep, yeah.
They're last taking that seriously. Yes.
Yeah, because Oklahoma's leaving for the SEC. So.
Yep.
Yep.
So there you go.
A lot of good things to like about Kansas here.
Taking a look at the Big 12 championship numbers now. So there's Oklahoma and Texas, but here's my team again, Kansas State. And you and I shared in the glory last year of Kansas State, 9-1. Okay, so now Oklahoma State's making a nice little rally at 18-1. Iowa State's also been much better lately at 30. There's Kansas at 45-1. And boy, if Jalen Daniels was actually able to get out there and play this week and they upset Oklahoma, they actually become a contender too with Jalen Daniels at quarterback. So
that number gets whacked in half if they win. Yes.
Yeah. So what do you think? What would you do as far as the Big 12, as far as those numbers are concerned? You have 4 teams with 1 loss. Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Texas, and Kansas State. So those were all the teams I just mentioned. With Oklahoma, of course, is the favorite. Without a loss, it'll be hard for Oklahoma not to make the championship game at this point. So what do you think? Yeah, Texas, by the way, looks like they're going to be playing their backup quarterback. The starter's out this week.
Right, so. Yours is out, right. I would go behind Oklahoma. I would go with coaching. I would go with Chris Kleiman from Kansas State, and I would go with Leipold from Kansas. That'd be my K and K, 2 teams that I would play behind Oklahoma to win the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, and you also can throw in. I mean, speaking of coaching, you got Matt Campbell in there too. So let's take.
But all the K and K guys need to do, Greg, is just make it to the championship game.
Yeah,
they don't have to win the regular season crown.
Yeah, Oklahoma, their schedule is not that bad, but the next 2 weeks are going to be big tests at Kansas and at Oklahoma State.
Yep.
Kansas State, meanwhile, at Texas next week. So there's your matchup right there. Winner is in the driver's seat. Loser, big trouble. And then Kansas State does end up with Kansas and Iowa State. And then Oklahoma State, Oklahoma State actually has the best schedule. Oklahoma State, now they do have to play Oklahoma next week, but the other games for Oklahoma State, 4 of their last 5 games are against the new Big 12 teams.
Who are really struggling.
That's Cincinnati, Central Florida, Houston, and BYU. So Oklahoma State's even a possibility at 18-1. So there you go. That's how that's how it looks. So yeah, like Kansas, but again, as we mentioned, no Ewers for Texas. We're probably going to see a little bit of Arch Manning. You probably won't get the start. Murphy will get the start. We'll see how that goes. If BYU didn't lay such an egg against TCU, I probably like BYU better in this one. But who knows? It might have just been a really bad one. But BYU did a good job last week of kind of riding the ship. But yeah, that's a big ask there. Meanwhile, West Virginia at Central Florida, and Neil Brown has got to try to stop the bleeding after that Hail Mary just killed this season at Central Florida.
For sure.
Iowa State's at Baylor, and Cincinnati at Oklahoma State. By the way, Oklahoma State has covered 13 straight as a home favorite of less than 33 when they take on an opponent off back-to-back straight-up losses. And Cincinnati is 0-5 straight-up ATS the last 5.
Well, that's a Mike Gundy thing. I think one of the worst lines of the season I recall was Oklahoma State being a 10-point home dog to Kansas State about 3 weeks ago. And it wasn't like Oklahoma State was a bad football team. They just weren't playing up to expectation. Yeah. And look what's happened since. They won that game. They've won everything since. And all of a sudden, they're back in the Big 12 race.
Yep.
So, just when you find these home dogs that don't look all that attractive, just ask yourself, what happens if they do win the game? And what are the prospects of them moving forward, much like Oklahoma State is doing right now?
All right, let's take a look at the Pac-12 next, because there's a lot, of course, as usual, going on in the Pac-12. And yes, Washington's sitting there all alone as the undefeated team. and you talk about decisions, coaching decisions. Look, it's really nice. I think that they've got themselves a nice little young head coach in this Dillingham kid. But you just talked about a decision that was made by Elko. What was he thinking? He's got Washington doing absolutely nothing in the entire game, and he has the opportunity on 4th and 3 to kick a field goal to go up, 4, 5, whatever.
Right, to extend the lead beyond the field goal.
Extend the lead.
Exactly. Yep.
And you go for it, which doesn't make any sense. And then you throw a pick 6 for 95 yards. I mean, what are you doing?
That was a brain fart by the head coach. He'll never admit it, but it was. I used Oregon for a real big play in that game, and I left with a bad taste in my mouth, to say the least, because I felt like I had much the better football team. They win the yards over 100 yards, and the head coach got in the way is really what mattered in the football game. But you don't do that, Greg. All you do when you try stuff like that is you open the door. It's like a team that all you have to do on a breakaway with the lead, get down to the 1 yard line, take a Patrick Mahomes slide, and then kneel out and take the win. Don't take the ball into the end zone, okay? Do the smart thing, and you don't open the door to a football team to possibly wake them up by failing on your attempt. That's what Brandon Staley does so much in the National Football League. And we're starting to see that same cancer, if you will, this coaching cancer happening in college football as well. And I just about wanted to throw up when I saw that.
Yeah, it's I mean, you just cannot open the door for a momentum swing. I don't understand why they do that.
Nope.
Anyway, Washington survived and won the football game. So you take a look at the rest of what's going on here, and Utah beating USC. What a game that was. I was getting really upset when Utah looked like they were going to blow that lead in the fourth quarter, and then they get the quarterback 25-yard scramble to pick up the first down, and then I'm looking at them lining up for the field goal. And I'm seeing it that the hash marks thing is all screwed up. The old college football lined up hash mark nonsense. And I'm like, this is, I don't like this. even though it looked like it was a pretty easy field goal. There's a college kicker, it's lined up. So what happens? Well, USC decides they want to freeze the kicker. And just when they decided to freeze the kicker, that gave Willingham, oh yeah, maybe I have a timeout. Yeah, you know what? Let's move the hash mark with my one timeout, and that's exactly what he did. He used the extra time in the timeout to realize that he should have thought of this already, and he moves the ball back to the middle of the field, calls his final timeout, kicks the field goal, beats USC. And look, I don't know how many more times I got to say it. When you get these situations where one team is beating the other team and then they're the underdog, like I said last week, it just seems to work 90% of the time that it's going to work in the favor of the team that's being disrespected. And that's exactly what happened again. And USC, now there were a lot of those stats that we talked about last week with USC and Lincoln Riley. Yeah, it's that one thing that you just it's that current thing that stats just can't equate, and that is that frame of mind that you have when one team has your number, and that's what happened again last week.
I want to see what happens to Lincoln Riley when Caleb Williams is playing in the National Football League next year. He doesn't have a NFL first round
Well,
caliber.
knowing him, he probably does. I don't know. I haven't looked.
He may, but I don't think he'll be up to the level of Caleb Williams.
No,
Not
I don't think so.
Right.
No.
Exactly. So he'll end up having to coach, is basically what I'm saying here. And I think he gets befuddled. I think he gets lost in the game a lot. He got away with it in the Big 12 because there was a lot of inferior teams there. There are a bunch of inferior teams also in the Pac-12 conference. But he shows what he's all about when he has to step up in big football games. Look at the Notre Dame game. Look at the Utah football game. He's just not a coach, I think, that steps up and delivers the goods when it counts.
The next big thing for USC is a 5-star quarterback by the name of Malachi Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll find out how good Malachi Nelson is for USC next year. All right. So anyway, taking a look at the numbers for the Pac-12, there they are. Washington, Oregon as the heavy favorites to have a rematch. You still have Oregon State, Utah, and USC sitting there because USC still can, if they can get their frame of mind back straight, they're still they can still get to the championship game and win the Pac-12 championship. But I don't know. That psyche is going to be kind of fragile right now, which is why I referenced Oregon State. 7-1 to win the Pac-12, Utah 8-1. But you got the big matchup, Oregon and Utah this week. And Oregon, and by the way, see, this is a little bit different because Utah, we talked how much they are a tough home team. But believe it or not, when they're a dog at home, not so good. They've lost 6 straight as a home dog, including 2-3-1 against the spread over those 6. They're also 0-5 against the spread as conference home dogs of less than 7. And in less than 7, when they're taking on a winning team, this is only the second time they've been a home dog since 2019. Oregon, meanwhile, and this series too has been a really good one because these two teams have played for the Pac-12 championship twice in the last 4 years. They both split. Last year, Oregon beat Utah at home by 3 points as a 1-point favorite. Bottom line is Oregon is one of these teams that has, unlike USC, has actually been pretty competitive with Utah. So the difference is there's 6 points, a lot of points to give, you would think, on the road at Utah. But after that huge win by Utah last week and Oregon kind of waiting for them, I kind of like Oregon in this spot.
Well, I like Oregon also in that spot. To take Washington out and replace them. But if I had to pair up another football team with them and say Washington does stub their toe and somehow doesn't make the Pac-12 championship game, of the other football teams that you have up on that list there, the one that's most appealing to me is UCLA. And the reason I'm saying that is they're one of only 10 teams in the country that have out-yarded every opponent they played so far this year. They haven't won all those football games, but at least they know when they take the field that they're not going to get pushed around on the football playing field as well. And who's to say if UCLA doesn't win out and find themselves in the Pac-12 championship game, who knows what can happen?
Yeah, and let's see if the schedule works in their favor. So
How many conference
Nah,
losses
they
do they
only
have?
have. Well, the problem, I guess the main issue is not just they got the 2 losses, but it's the fact that they are only there's only one team on the list that they can beat and catch, and that's USC. So because they've already lost to Utah and they've already lost to Oregon State, and they don't play Oregon. So
So they could dispose of USC with 2 losses by beating them, but they can't dispose of Oregon and Washington, is what you're
yeah,
saying.
they would
Yeah,
need Oregon and Utah and Oregon State to beat each other up,
right.
which could happen. They could run the table, easier schedule, but they still have to go play at Arizona. So we know
Which
that
could be
won't be
tricky.
easy.
It could be tricky, right?
So who would you go with? Are you going with, because again, it's easy to say Washington, Oregon, but if you take a look at the odds, the better odds, if you want to take one of these teams, which would it be? Would you take Oregon State, Utah, or USC if it's not Oregon or Washington? One of those teams drops out. Which one of
If
those
it's
three
if
would,
it's
would you
not either of
trust?
the two, it would be Utah for me.
Okay. All right. Uh,
Coaching.
yeah. Oh yeah. No question. Big game, by the way. Oregon State at Arizona that you referenced before. That game, I hope that game's on the Pac-12 network. Please don't do that to us. Please. That better be on regular TV. I
The
mean,
network no one can watch, right?
that would be a crime. Okay. Now, let's run through the rest. And American, there's a couple of big games. The really big one and a game I like, and I like both of these teams. I've talked about that enough. And that is Tulane and Rice. And but I just have a feeling about Rice this week because we've talked about how like Florida State and a few of these other teams look vulnerable. Well, so has Tulane lately. In their last 3 wins, last week against North Texas, they were tied with 3 minutes left. The week before that, against Memphis, they trailed 21-10 in the third quarter. And the week before that at UAB, they trailed 20-7 in the second quarter. So they have been just risking playing with fire. And here comes this Rice team that's having a great season, best season that they've had in a long time. And they've covered 13 straight as conference dogs of 10 or less off a straight up win. Now the spread is 10.5. So we'll see if that comes into factor. I'm not taking Rice because of that, but that's just a little ice cream on top. Tulane also 0-7 against the spread when they take on an opponent off an upset win, which Rice is after blasting Tulsa last week in their most impressive win of the season. So I just think this is a tricky spot for Tulane, and at one of these weeks they're not going to be able to perform the comeback. I still think they're the best team in the AAC, but I get the feeling that one of these weeks they're going to get caught.
Well, I think they will too. I just don't think it's going to be this week. They're the conference bear. Everybody's looking up at them, and there's no question about that. They've also been terrific on the road. 9-0 the spread on the road when they come off a conference home game, doing just that. And the Owls have lost the money 4 times in a row in the series here. I don't think Tulane, being the conference bear that they are, trips up in a spot like this. Rice does have some nice numbers, and Rice is a better team than they've been in the past. But if they weren't the better team as they've been in the past here, the spread would be much, much higher. So the oddsmaker has acknowledged uh, how good Rice has improved for this football season here, but I think Tulane is the team to beat in this conference here, and I don't want to step in front of them.
All right, so there are 6 teams that still have a shot to play in the championship game. Tulane, SMU, and Texas San Antonio are the undefeated teams. Memphis, Rice, and Florida Atlantic are the one-loss teams. So who are you going with? I got a feeling that you're going to go with we're both going to go with the 2 teams that we've been behind the most, and that's Tulane and Texas San Antonio.
Absolutely. The team I just mentioned and the team we talked about a lot last week with Frank Harris being back, and they're playing really good football right now.
Yeah, they blew out Florida Atlantic.
Yes, exactly. Right now you're getting at plus 450. They keep playing this way. That game could be a pick 'em against Tulane if they keep playing this way by the end of the football season here. So you're getting a plus 450 here. Those would be my 2 choices in this conference.
Yeah, taking a look at when I think they're playing the last game of the season. Yep, at Tulane. See, and again, we mentioned this last week. That's the only thing I don't like about that possibility because we could see them playing a rematch the next week.
Yep, exactly.
So, but we'll see. And in SMU, by the way, Lashley has done a great job with SMU this year. I
Yes,
mean,
he
he's
sure
had a
has.
load of transfers, and they have just been. I mean, they hung with Oklahoma. Their worst game was the TCU game, but I mean, in the last two games since their bye, they've won by a combined 86-10.
Wow.
I mean, they're having a really good year. So SMU is definitely now. SMU will be at Rice next week, and then they're at Memphis on the 18th. They did not play Tulane. Matter of fact, I don't even think they played Texas San Antonio. No. So schedule break, and maybe that will help SMU maybe get to the championship game. All
Well,
right.
they'd be number three for me. They've had a really good year. What would they be if Mordecai were still there? That's the question.
Yeah. Right.
You know, right?
The other game I just wanted to mention was Memphis and North Texas. Again, Memphis is still in the race, but I think that's a good matchup. I actually like North Texas this week. They're starting to play better football. They were the team I mentioned that almost beat Tulane last week. Now let's go to the Mountain West, and this is the conference to watch college football this week. There are some really big games in the Mountain West this week. You got Wyoming at Boise, you got Air Force at Colorado State, and then you have UNLV at Fresno. So these are three of the more, and we'll, matter of fact, I can pop it up right now, the under the radar games, because they're all in it. So I've got 6 under the radar games, and 3 of them are in this conference.
Okay,
then,
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, and then I also have Tulane and Rice, Troy and Texas State, and Old Dominion and James Madison, which we'll get to when we talk about the Sun Belt. But yeah, there are those really look. Air Force, we know they're the favorites as well. They should be with their defense. And I have to ask you if you watched the end of the Air Force Navy game last week.
No, I did not.
Okay. Air Force is favored by 10 against Tulane. Air Force, it's 10-0 with about 3 minutes to go. Navy throws a 10-yard pick six, and Air Force goes up 17-0. And we're talking about Air Force's defense and Navy's offense against Air Force defense. Well, what happens? Air Force lets them go down the field. You're thinking the game is over if you got Air Force. Well, if they haven't done anything all game, why would they do anything now? They can't throw the football. They let them go down the field and score the touchdown. But are you ready for this?
It was 17-7 at that point, right?
No, it's 17-6.
6, okay.
The coach decides to go for 2.
Wow, to go down 9. That's a brain.
He decides to go for 2.
Oh,
It
my.
makes no sense. The game was over. There was only a few seconds on the clock. Why would you even attempt to go for? So I just imagine the scales there. Now I had Air Force, so I'm like, he's going for 2, really? All right, cool. And then on the other hand, you're thinking Navy. You're thinking because again, this could have been who knows. One sports book it could be 9, another could be 11. Who knows what was going on here? I bought a point, I bought a hat. So all this stuff might have been going on. It didn't make any sense. Why would he go for 2? And he went for 2. He didn't get it, and Air Force covered. So.
You think it's part of that crazy analytical world that these coaches live in when they score their first touchdown, they want to automatically go for 2?
I don't know.
Because they
I
realize
wonder if they asked him. I'm sure that's not the first question.
Well, he wasn't going to get the ball again, so that would have been a moot point anyway.
It's just very strange. Okay, so Air Force won and covered, and they're the team to beat. But you know what? I think this is upset possibility this week. At some point, they're gonna just like every team. At some point, they're just not gonna bring it. They're gonna have that off night, that off week, and this Colorado State team might be the perfect team. We all know Air Force is a better team, but Colorado State's just had a really nice year. They had that big, exciting overtime loss to Colorado. They pulled out the miracle win against Boise. They hung tough last week at UNLV. And by the way, this is the sandwich game for Air Force. You had Navy one week, and then we got Army next week.
A military sandwich. Yeah.
Yep. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to roll the dice as one of my double-digit upsets this week with Colorado State. But anyway, Air Force is definitely proven and will end up in the championship game.
Oh, for sure, they're going to end up in the championship game. Obviously, the team to beat here as well. The question is, can they get the job done this particular week? They've kind of dominated the series. I think they've cashed six straight times in a row. But like you say, and I like your point, somewhere along the way in the course of a really good season comes a clunker. Sometimes you win a game that you shouldn't. Sometimes you don't even win that game. They're wake-up calls. And maybe this could be that wake-up call for Air Force this week because you have a Colorado State team, as you said, has vastly improved this football season.
All right, now taking a look at the odds, the only other team besides Air Force that is undefeated in the Mountain West is UNLV. So you have Boise. I mean, I don't understand what Boise's doing as the second choice. They're having an awful year for them. And as you mentioned, I had to do a double take when you did your pick on Wyoming in the show yesterday when you said that not only were you taking Wyoming, and I forget why you said it, but you're going against also a losing team. And I was like, I didn't even realize. I go, Boise State's a losing team?
There you go.
And they are, of course. And yet they're the second choice. I mean, what is this? I mean, they're not a losing team for flukes. Yes, the Hail Mary's one of them. But please, this is not a good Boise team. They're not played well. Meanwhile, you got Fresno State and the two teams that have been like Cinderella almost this year. And I'd bet on both of those, and I'm sure you would too. I'd take Wyoming at 6-1 and UNLV at 8-1 and hope that one of the two ends up in the championship game.
Unquestionably, that would have to be the move. You could dismiss Boise State, that they're a fraud. I'll just tell them it like it is. They're a fraud. Name and reputation team. Wyoming's always comes hard. Craig Bohl's a really good coach. He's got them in position to win. I think they would be my choice. If you can only handcuff me and take one team, it would be Wyoming. And you have to give UNLV their due. I mean, they really, really put up a really nice football season this year. You think at some point it's going to implode on this football team. I don't know where, I don't know when, which leaves me with Wyoming as my choice to play in the championship game against Air Force.
Yeah, and if you look at it, and again, this is a huge game, Wyoming and Boise, the winner, driver's seat, the loser, probably out of it. Wyoming has lost 6 straight to Boise. Well, I think it's time to end that losing streak, even though they've covered 5 out of the 6. And they've covered the last 4 against Boise as double-digit dogs in each. And that just shows you that even when they weren't maybe their better teams, they've always hung tough with Boise. And I remember the last time they played them last year, it was a devastating loss. They had some, I forget what happened. The Boise State guy fumbled the football late. Wyoming had it. They had a chance. It could have kicked a field goal, and then the quarterback threw an interception, I think, in the end zone. It was just really a tough loss for Wyoming. Anyway, so we both like them in this game with Wyoming getting the 5 plus 170 and a money line. Again, we talked about the Colorado State game, and the other one is the UNLV Fresno game. So again, same thing, the winner, driver's seat, especially UNLV. So even if UNLV loses, it's still got a loss, so they're not out of it. But Fresno State can't afford to lose this game. Also, keep an eye on Mikey Keene, the quarterback for Fresno, banged up. So I would grab UNLV now before anything possibly happens with the quarterback situation for Fresno. I'm not saying it will, but it could. And there are some big trends going UNLV's way. They're 9-3. The last 12 as a road dog. Fresno, meanwhile, when they're off, if you take a look at it, they are off a bye, 1-9 against the spread in their last 10 with rest when they take on an opponent off consecutive straight-up wins. They're also 0-12 against the spread in their last 12 as a favorite of 13 or less in the first of back-to-back home games. I don't even need those trends to take UNLV. I think they're being completely disrespected here as a 7.5-point dog.
Unquestionably, they are. That's all. Again, a combination of a name and reputation type football game. Fresno State's a very, very good defensive team. They're a very, very bad offensive team. Their offense scores just about as many points as or gains as many yards as their defense gives up. So points could be at a premium here for Fresno State in a contest like this. And UNLV's got a pretty nice offense here. I think this is a nice spot for the Rebels here to pull the upset.
Okay, now let's move on to the Sun Belt, and we're going to pop up the Sun Belt odds right there. Troy and South Alabama, the two teams that were strong in one division last year. South Alabama was able to get in, and then you take a look at the rest of the teams, and really, we said this a few weeks ago. There's just a lot going on, competitively speaking, in the Sun Belt this year, with James Madison, of course, as the top team. They are the undefeated team in the East. Georgia State, Old Dominion, Georgia Southern all have one loss. Georgia State plays Georgia Southern. That's tonight, I believe. And I like Georgia State in that game. I just think this is their year. They had to beat Louisiana for the first time. That was last week. So I think and by the way, they've won 3 straight against Georgia Southern, straight up and against the spread. And they're just a 1-point dog. Old Dominion and James Madison. And of course, this is an interesting game because and Andy actually said he liked Old Dominion in the game because they're getting a lot of points. Remember, I told you I like to find out what the spread is first and then find out what I would do. Honestly, I was shocked that this spread was 19 points. Completely shocked. I thought this was going to be like 13 or 14 at the most. And when they said 19, I was like, whoa, what are we doing here? So, and you know what? Just like we said with Air Force, maybe this is the week for James Madison. And Old Dominion has covered 5 straight games, just like James Madison. But hey, Old Dominion is the one getting 19. And they're 8-1 against the spread as dogs of 8 or more, following a straight up win, 2-0 in that spot this year. And they got revenge on their minds after losing 37-3 last year to James Madison. And why not beat them as they're undefeated? So yeah, this is a night game, but I'm rolling the dice because some of these can come through. We saw what happened last week with Virginia, and I can definitely see maybe one of these heavy favorites losing this week. And I'm gonna take the outright win with Old Dominion this week.
Well, I don't blame you. I mean, there's a lot of cases to be made for the Monarchs in a football game like this. I'm going to go to another game on the list here that not a lot of people are hovering over, but I think Texas State has got a real nice football team this year.
Yep.
G.K. Kinney's done a real nice job in his first year as a head coach. They got a really, really wide open offense. He was a quarterback, and that's the mantra that the offense takes when they take the field in every football game. If they're down, they have the potential to score and come back and stay in the football game. And, you know, you got the conference bear in Troy sitting up there right there. A big, big game for Texas State. The thing that jumps off this page to me as far as the conference odds go is Appalachian State 18-1.
Yeah, they've really it's amazing what's happened to them. I mean, they are sitting right now. They only have 2 losses, not 3. So they'd have to run the table and just considering Georgia State, Old Dominion, and Georgia Southern they all have 1 loss. So they would have to just lose one more time.
Right.
For App State to tie them. But again, the problem is that they have James Madison ahead. So let me see what the situation there is if they play them, because they're in the same division, so they should play. Yeah, so they get to play James Madison at James Madison on November 18th. So what they need to do is run the table and hope that James Madison loses just once besides the game that Appalachian State plays them.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't matter if James Madison wins or loses. They're not going anywhere. They can't play in this championship game.
Yes, perfect point. I forgot about that. Yes.
Right.
So we don't so we disregard them. Correct.
Right. We could do that. It's still all going to be a tough game, regardless, obviously. You know,
True.
Jimmy Matt, pretty nice football team here. But you've got a lot of pedigree there in Appalachian State.
Yes.
And, you know, for a football team that's in the locker room, the coaches, you guys, hey, guys, we're 18-1 to win this thing. You know, there's 6 other teams that they think are a lot better than we are. And I think they could find some momentum somewhere going on along down the road here. South Alabama was a good football team to start. I think they're tailing off right now, and they're going the wrong way as far as momentum is concerned. And the other sneaky team might be Marshall, a football team that sometimes plays when you least expect it, and then sometimes doesn't show up when you expect them to do just that. But they do have potential and capability. But Appalachian State would get my eye at 18-1.
Yeah, just looking at the number itself, Coastal I'd feel a little bit better about, but unfortunately, it looks like Grayson McCall ain't going to play in the game against Marshall on Saturday. So that's a big blow there for Coastal Carolina if he does not play. Like you mentioned, the Troy-Texas State game, it's a 6-point spread. Texas State's a 2-1 on the money line. And Troy has won 8 straight versus Texas State. But the last 2 years by just 3 points each. Troy has looked awfully good lately, though. They've won 4 straight, and the last 3 by 84-10 margin. So they're playing really good football. Texas State threw that Louisiana Lafayette game away a couple weeks ago, which was a real shame because they should have won that game.
Yep.
And they blew that game, and that could come back to haunt them because if they don't beat Troy on Saturday, they'll be in big trouble there.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, Georgia State is the team that I've got in my mind as the team maybe to win it all. That's why I'm saying I'm going to pick them in this game against Georgia Southern and see if they can be the team to beat. And then finally, the MAC. Let's just talk a little bit about the MAC because I believe they're going back to their weekday games next week because there's only 2 games this week on Saturday. So I think they're revving up for their weekday games. Toledo is the money line favorite. Ohio is just 2-1. Makes a lot of sense. It would be Toledo and Ohio. And the reason why it probably will be is because Brett Gabbert injured last week in the game against Toledo. And they were on a run. It looked like they had like several possessions, and the quarterback from Miami of Ohio, the backup just wasn't very good. And that's unfortunate because he has to play Ohio this week. So if Ohio takes care of business this week against Miami of Ohio, it's looking pretty good that we're going to see Ohio and Toledo. I don't think there's going to be any drama there in the MAC.
I don't think there will either. Unfortunately for Miami, they had their chance last week and didn't show up for the football game
and lost their quarterback for the year.
On top of it, yeah. So that was really a double devastating loss for them, if you will, in that sense. That's the reason why they're taking as many points as they are at Ohio U this week. But I think, like you, there's only 2 teams you can look at in this conference. And those are the 2 big boys, Toledo and Ohio U. I'd be stunned if they're not playing for the championship.
All right. So let's quickly go through the end of our script here, and that is the double-digit picks. So I'll just flash them again on the board. You can see them there, 6 of them in total. Had a good week on the single-digit dogs last week, hit all 3 of them. But the double digits are just killing me this year, which is a surprise. I've never had this much trouble with the but I think, I don't know, I'm getting the feeling this could be my week. So you have Northwestern, Florida, Colorado State, and Old Dominion as my official double-digit upsets. And the ones that, and I actually was considering Wake Forest, and I was considering Vanderbilt against Ole Miss. So I was considering them, meaning I'll throw a buck or 2 on those money lines and some parlays or something to see if I could take advantage. But those were a couple others that just did not make my list. And I'll talk more about those on my show tomorrow. But out of those 4, who do you like?
Well, I know who you like. I won't divulge that, but I'll tell you who I do know who you like. Even though you might not know who you like, I do know who you like.
Okay.
But I'm going to go to Florida, the Gators.
There you go.
Somewhere along the way, like we talked earlier, bumps in the road happen to certain football teams. Okay, and the Georgia Bulldogs are just waiting. They're ripe. They're primed to be upset. And the funny thing is, or the sad thing is, they can lose and they're still going to be in the football playoff.
Yeah.
So it's not like must win game for Georgia. It's just to keep their number 1 ranking is all it is really about. But I'm going to call Florida for my double-digit dog to win the game. And I'm going to guess who your double-digit dog is going to be, the Monarchs of Old Dominion.
Out of those?
Out of that list, yes.
If I was going to just take, I mean, I would, I tell you the truth, I probably would take Florida.
Good.
As the top one. And that's just because of the fact that even though you're going against Georgia, see, here's the thing that I didn't even realize it myself, but 3 of those are against undefeated teams. And maybe that's a good thing because, again, we are at the point in the season where some of these undefeated teams will lose.
Well, you know what that is, Greg? We're at the time of the year when the noose gets tighter and tighter for these undefeated football teams.
Yep.
And this is where we see the upsets.
Yep. So maybe we'll see some of that happen this week. I certainly hope so. But that's going to wrap it up. Don't forget to check out, and we have a link in the description of how you can check out Mark's weekly ATS podcast show on the Playbook Experts YouTube channel. And again, you want to subscribe to the new Our Lads channel. We have a description and link for that as well. And we'll be talking tomorrow for more trends. We'll go over all the other games and trends that we did not go over today in college football, as well as the NFL. So that's coming up a little bit later on. Mark, we will talk to you again next week. It's getting we're getting to the serious season.
Yes, we will. We'll be getting down to the nitty gritty. It will be November. That's when we'll really start attacking these undefeated teams.
All right. So for Mark Lawrence and Greg DePalma, we'll see everybody again for week 10 on next week's show.